In the early morning of June 15, 1944, First Lieutenant Frank Tachsky, a 29-year-old Marine officer from New Brighton, Pennsylvania, prepared to land on Saipan's southern beaches. Tachsky commanded 40 men, a unit unlike any other, handpicked from the brig and punishment details. Their mission was deep reconnaissance, operating alone for days behind enemy lines against an island garrison estimated at 30,000 Japanese troops. Marine planners had already calculated that scout sniper casualties in the Pacific Theater averaged 73%. This platoon was the Marine Corps' second experiment with specialized reconnaissance units, formed after the costly Battle of Tarawa, where the Corps lost 994 men in just 76 hours. Colonel James Risley of the 6th Marine Regiment believed that accurate intelligence on Japanese fortifications could drastically reduce these casualties. He needed men who could kill silently, map enemy positions, and survive alone in hostile territory. Standard Marine training produced excellent assault troops, but Risley required men who ignored rules and thought for themselves, finding them among the punishment details. Tachsky's recruitment criteria were specific. He sought the winners of fights, men with disciplinary records for brawling, proving they could handle close combat. The Marine Corps labeled them troublemakers. Tachsky called them survivors. Over 2 months at Camp Tarawa in Hawaii, he assembled 42 Marines, ranging from 17 to 34 years old, most of whom had criminal records before joining. They were given a choice: military prison or combat duty, and they chose combat. Their 6 months of specialized training focused on silent killing techniques with knives and bare hands, how to move undetected through jungle terrain, reading Japanese maps, and coordinating naval gunfire. They trained with M903 Springfield rifles fitted with 8-power scopes, learning to hit a man-sized target from 600 yards, and mastered bazookas to destroy fortified positions. The platoon also honed skills in theft, a necessity, as the Marine Corps was the poorest equipped branch of the American military in 1944. They stole surplus weapons, outdated equipment, and inadequate rations from better supplied Army and Navy units, earning the nickname the 40 Thieves from other Marines in the 6th Regiment. By June 1944, they had memorized Japanese fortification patterns from aerial photographs of Saipan and were ready for their mission. They were to land with the first assault wave, push inland, locate Japanese positions, and radio the coordinates back for artillery and naval bombardment. They would then disappear into the jungle to continue mapping enemy fortifications for days, with no support or rescue if captured. Saipan was the first Japanese territory the Americans would invade, and was expected to be defended with suicidal determination by a garrison of 30,000 Imperial Army and Navy troops, plus thousands of armed civilians. The Japanese had fortified the 14-mile-long island with concrete pillboxes, interconnected trenches, and underground bunkers, registering every potential American advance route for artillery. American casualties were predicted to exceed 50%. Tachsky led his men through the surf and machine gun fire, reaching the beach at 8:47 a.m. By 9:30 a.m., the 40 Thieves had pushed 300 yards inland, farther than any other Marine unit, finding themselves alone ahead of the main force. They moved through the dense jungle 50 yards apart, communicating through hand signals. Their orders allowed them to operate independently and make their own tactical decisions, a unique authority on Saipan. At 10:15 a.m., Sergeant Bill Conopple spotted the first Japanese position, a concrete pillbox housing a heavy machine gun, camouflaged to remain invisible from the beach. This position covered all 3 possible routes for the 2nd Marine Division's advance, a kill zone that would cost hundreds of lives. Tachsky quickly decided to eliminate the threat, despite the risk of compromising their reconnaissance mission. Private Marvin Strumbo, using a bazooka, positioned 80 yards away. At 10:32 a.m., his rocket detonated inside the pillbox's firing slit, instantly killing the 7-man crew. The platoon vanished into the jungle before the smoke cleared. By noon, the 40 Thieves had identified and mapped 17 Japanese positions, including machine gun nests, mortar pits, artillery observation posts, and ammunition storage areas. Tachsky radioed the coordinates to headquarters using encoded transmissions. Within 20 minutes, naval gunfire from offshore destroyers began demolishing the targets, confirming their mission: find the enemy, mark them for destruction, and move on. Their rapid advance carried them 2 miles inland by early afternoon, into terrain the main Marine force would not reach for 3 more days. The island was more heavily fortified than expected, with over 200 enemy soldiers dug into one valley alone. The accurate coordinates they provided allowed naval gunfire to destroy positions in minutes that would otherwise take days of frontal assault to capture, effectively changing how the Marine Corps fought. At 3:40 p.m., the platoon discovered an unexpected and critical threat, a Japanese tank battalion staging area with 37 Type 97 medium tanks. Marine intelligence had estimated only 12 tanks on Saipan. This discovery was the most serious threat to the beachhead, as Japanese doctrine called for mass tank attacks at night when naval gunfire would be less effective. If these tanks attacked after dark, they could break through Marine lines and reach vulnerable supply areas, potentially collapsing the entire invasion. Tachsky immediately radioed the coordinates, but all American assets, naval gunfire, airstrikes, and artillery, were committed elsewhere for at least 4 hours. By then, it would be dark, and the tanks would likely have moved. Tachsky made a calculation. His platoon carried 6 bazookas with 6 rounds each, 36 rockets total against 37 tanks. The decision to attack violated every Marine tactical principle, but Tachsky had recruited men who fought dirty and survived. At 4:15 p.m., he ordered the platoon to prepare for assault. They knew they couldn't destroy all 37 tanks, but disabling 10 or 15 would significantly reduce the threat. However, as the teams moved into position at 4:25 p.m., the tanks started their engines. Japanese tank crews and 1,000 infantry units began mobilizing for an attack, a dusk assault earlier than predicted. The window for a surprise attack had closed. Tachsky ordered his platoon to shadow the tank battalion and report its movements instead of engaging. The tank battalion began moving at 5:07 p.m. in 2 columns toward the coast. This was a major assault intended to break through Marine lines and destroy supply dumps, artillery, and command posts before nightfall. The 40 Thieves followed 200 yards to the flank, radioing updated coordinates every 10 minutes. Their real-time intelligence allowed Marine units on the beach to reposition bazookas, move Sherman tanks forward, and adjust artillery aim points, preparing the entire 2nd Marine Division for a massed tank attack. At 6:15 p.m., the Japanese formation halted 1 mile from the beach, and after an 11-minute conference, they changed direction, turning north. Tachsky was surprised, as intelligence maps showed no valuable targets there. By 7:05 p.m., as the sun set, Tachsky realized their plan. The Japanese were targeting the gap between the 2nd Marine Division and the 4th Marine Division. A breakthrough there would split the American forces in half. Tachsky radioed the warning, but dusk had fallen. Radio communication was difficult, and American units were refueling and resupplying. The gap was defended by only 2 Marine companies, approximately 340 men, against 37 tanks and 1,000 infantry. The Japanese attack began at 7:23 p.m. Marine bazooka fire destroyed the first 3 tanks, but 34 more kept coming, backed by screaming infantry. The breakthrough was succeeding, and within 15 minutes, enemy tanks would reach the beach. Tachsky, observing the chaos, saw 1 Japanese tank separate from the main formation, heading directly toward the 6th Marine Regiment's command post, where Colonel Risley was coordinating the divisional response. The tank commander had found a 200-yard gap in the defenses, and if the tank reached the command post, it could paralyze the entire regimental response. Risley and his staff were 400 yards away and completely unaware. Tachsky had maybe 3 minutes to act. He grabbed Private Herbert Hodges, the platoon's best bazooka shooter. The Type 97's 50mm frontal armor could deflect a bazooka round, so Hodges needed a perfect side shot to guarantee penetration. They raced down the slope and reached a position 30 yards from the tank's projected path at 7:31 p.m. The tank stopped at 15 yards as the commander checked his map. Hodges fired at 7:32 p.m. The rocket hit the tank's left side below the turret ring, penetrating and detonating inside, killing the 4-man crew instantly. The tank erupted in flames 6 seconds later. Japanese infantry nearby saw the fireball and assumed they had encountered a major Marine defensive position. They redirected their assault away from the command post and toward what they thought was a larger threat. Tachsky's shot had inadvertently misdirected an entire Japanese infantry battalion, securing the command post. However, the bazooka's muzzle flash had revealed Tachsky's position. Enemy machine gun and mortar fire immediately began raking the area. The platoon had to withdraw immediately, splitting into small independent teams of 4 or 5 men toward predetermined rally points. Japanese patrols were everywhere, searching for the Marines who had destroyed their tank. By 9 p.m., only 23 men had reached the primary rally point. 17 were still missing. Tachsky led the assembled group back to Marine lines, planning to send small rescue teams at dawn. Using the pre-arranged recognition signal and password, the 40 Thieves crossed into friendly territory at 9:41 p.m. The Japanese tank attack continued all night, with American bazookas, Sherman tanks, and artillery destroying 27 of the 37 tanks by dawn. The attack failed, but at a cost of 78 casualties for the 2nd Battalion, 6th Marines. Tachsky assembled search teams at First Light on June 16th. The first body found was Private Edwin Evans, shot twice in the chest. His dog tags were missing, as the Japanese often collected them as trophies. A second team found 3 more Marines who had been captured alive, tied, and executed by bayonet, confirming that Japanese forces on Saipan rarely took prisoners. By 10 a.m., 6 missing Marines were located alive, having evaded patrols and reached Marine lines independently. That brought the count to 29 men accounted for. At 11:15 a.m., a search team found 5 more Marines hiding in a cave system 1 mile behind Japanese lines. They were alive but pinned down by enemy patrols. Tachsky chose a high-risk, high-speed rescue, assembling a 6-man team and moving out at 11:47 p.m. The 5 trapped Marines were exhausted and dehydrated. One had malaria with 103-degree fever, and another had dysentery. The sick men needed immediate medical attention. The combined group of 11 Marines began the mile-long extraction in broad daylight. They encountered a Japanese patrol of 20 soldiers at 400 yards. Tachsky chose to ambush, gambling that a swift elimination of the entire patrol would allow them to escape before other Japanese units could converge on the gunfire. The Marines positioned themselves in an L-shaped ambush, and when the Japanese walked into the kill zone at 1:23 p.m., 11 Marines opened fire. The patrol was destroyed in 7 seconds, 20 enemy soldiers killed with no survivors or radio transmissions. But the gunfire had been heard. The Marines ran, abandoning stealth, with Japanese whistles and shouts mobilizing in the jungle behind them. At 1:29 p.m., their path dropped into a steep, 40-foot ravine. Going around was too slow. Tachsky chose the ravine. They were halfway down when Japanese soldiers appeared on the ridge and opened fire. 2 Marines were wounded. The ravine channeled them, forcing them forward, but at 1:38 p.m. they realized the ravine ended in a box canyon, no exit. They were trapped, with at least 40 Japanese soldiers descending to surround them. Tachsky noticed a fissure in the canyon's rear wall, hidden by vegetation, suggesting a possible escape route. 2 Marines investigated and found a narrow opening that widened into a passageway leading upward through the rock. The Marines squeezed through one at a time, pushing the 2 sick men ahead of them in complete darkness. They could hear the Japanese entering the box canyon, searching for the Americans who had seemingly vanished. The passage emerged on the opposite side of the ridge at 2:07 p.m., behind Japanese lines, but with the enemy focused on the ravine. They covered the final 600 yards to friendly lines in 8 minutes, crossing into American-held territory at 2:23 p.m.
All 11 Marines reached safety. This brought the total account to 34 Marines. By nightfall on June 16th, 3 more were found alive. 2 bodies were discovered, and 3 men remained missing, officially listed as missing in action. The 40 Thieves had lost at least 6 killed and 3 presumed dead, a 22% casualty rate. Despite the losses, they had accomplished their mission. identifying over 200 Japanese positions, destroying dozens of fortifications, preventing a tank attack on the command post, and providing critical intelligence. Colonel Risley ordered the 40 Thieves to rest and resupply for one night. At dawn on June 17th, with their numbers at 37 men, they returned to the jungle for a mission even deeper behind enemy lines. Their objective was a ridge system 3 miles inland, believed to contain Japanese artillery positions that had been shelling American forces for 2 days. Aerial reconnaissance had failed to locate the guns, as they were camouflaged inside caves, making ground reconnaissance essential. They reached the target ridge at 08:15 hours. Tachsky counted 8 cave entrances large enough to hide artillery. The caves were connected by tunnels, allowing the Japanese to fire, then relocate before American counterfire could respond. To map the tunnels and find the guns, Corporal Roscoe Mullins and Private Strombo volunteered to penetrate the cave system. Using shielded flashlights, they moved into the darkness. They found the first artillery piece, a Type 91 105mm howitzer, at 10:12 hours. Over the next 40 minutes, they discovered 2 more guns, a command post, an ammunition magazine, and sleeping quarters for at least 60 soldiers, confirming the tunnel system was far more extensive than intelligence had estimated. At 11:03 hours, they concealed themselves as a dozen Japanese soldiers walked past within 3 feet. They exited at 11:27 hours, having gathered enough intelligence. Tachsky determined that standard Marine assault tactics would fail against the interconnected caves, which were too deep for artillery. The only solution was to seal the entrances with demolitions, trapping the Japanese inside, but engineer units were days away. At 12:15 hours, the platoon moved toward their secondary objective, Garrison, Saipan's administrative capital. Intelligence needed to know if the town was defended. Reaching Garrison required crossing 4 miles of enemy-controlled territory. They reached the town's edge at 15:40 hours. Most buildings were destroyed, but Japanese soldiers were moving through the ruins. At 16:05 hours, Tachsky decided on a virtually suicidal mission that would become legendary. 5 Marines would enter Garrison in broad daylight for close reconnaissance. Tachsky, Strombo, Mullins, Corporal Irazi, and Private Don Evans moved toward the town carrying only rifles, knives, and sidearms. Having removed all noisy equipment, they entered the town at 16:41 hours. Japanese soldiers were everywhere. They counted at least 200 enemy troops visible in the town center. The Japanese were using Garrison as a staging area for counterattacks, not a fixed fortification, an important distinction for Marine commanders. At 17:08 hours, Kazi spotted 5 Japanese military bicycles. The Marines immediately formed an audacious plan. They would ride through town like Japanese soldiers. They correctly reasoned that in the chaos of Garrison, 5 men on bicycles would attract less attention than 5 men on foot trying to hide. Tachsky approved the plan instantly. At 17:15 hours, the Marines began riding through the enemy capital. Japanese troops ignored them, some waving or shouting greetings. For 43 minutes, the 40 Thieves rode through Garrison, mapping positions, counting troops, and identifying supply dumps. They passed within yards of Japanese officers who never suspected they were enemy reconnaissance. They exited the town at 17:58 hours and abandoned the bicycles a mile later. The reconnaissance provided detailed intelligence that would be crucial for the eventual assault. The 40 Thieves reached Marine lines at 19:32 hours, having penetrated deeper into Japanese territory for 14 hours. Over the next 3 weeks, they continued similar missions, providing intelligence that saved countless Marine lives, ambushing patrols, and calling in coordinates for artillery strikes. They witnessed Japanese atrocities, including civilians forced to jump from cliffs and the execution of prisoners. They operated in small teams for days, suffering from malaria, dysentery, heat exhaustion, and running out of food and water, forcing them to steal from Japanese supply dumps and drink from contaminated streams. By July 9th, when Saipan was declared secure, the 40 thieves had lost 12 men killed and 9 wounded, a 56% casualty rate. The survivors were physically and mentally exhausted, but they had accomplished their mission. Marine commanders estimated the 40 thieves' reconnaissance work had reduced overall Marine casualties by at least 15%, potentially saving 2,000 lives. They went on to fight at Tinian and returned to Saipan for mopping up operations. After the war, most members struggled with post-traumatic stress disorder, suffering recurring nightmares, turning to alcohol, and being unable to maintain civilian employment or relationships. The psychological cost was never officially recognized or treated. Frank Tachsky became mayor of Sturgeon Bay, Wisconsin, and never spoke about the war. His son only learned about the 40 thieves after finding his father's footlocker following his death in 2011. The story of the platoon that changed Marine Corps tactics remained largely unknown for 66 years. The Scout Sniper Platoon of the 6th Marine Regiment was one of the first elite special operations units in American military history. Their tactics of deep reconnaissance, silent killing, and independent operations behind enemy lines influenced the development of modern Special Forces units, including Navy SEALs and Marine Force reconnaissance. They proved that small, highly trained units could accomplish missions that entire battalions could not. 40 men recruited from brigs and punishment details became one of the most effective combat units in the Pacific War. The Marines who called them criminals were wrong. They were warriors. These men sacrificed everything, and they deserve to be remembered.